Have you ever wondered what would happen if you died inside a church and returned with a direct message from Jesus about the spiritual war that's about to erupt? In today's video, you'll learn the true and terrifying story of Caleb Walker, who died during a shooting and received a divine revelation about 4 secret spiritual books that could change the fate of humanity. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below about the city you're watching from so we can spread this message as far as possible. My name is Caleb Walker. I'm 22 years old, and I'm from Tennessee, in the southern United States. I never imagined that an ordinary Sunday would become the most decisive day for my soul, the day I was shot in the chest inside my own church and dragged into the invisible world, where hell and heaven revealed themselves before me. It was March 12, 2023, a sunny Sunday, the kind where everything seems too normal to go wrong. I woke to the smell of coffee my mother made every weekend. I played with my 6-year-old nephew in the backyard while we got ready for church. Our church was small, perched on a hill, with wooden pews and open windows that let in the light. Called Covenant Hills Church, it was more of a shelter than a building. But that morning, a man walked in, and what he carried in his hands was not a Bible. I heard the sound first, dry, sharp, impossible to mistake. The first shot pierced the stained glass window, the second, the pastor's chest, and the third, mine. The pain was instantaneous, but the fear, it was replaced by something worse. The feeling that evil had invaded a holy place, and that my life there, in that second, would become something eternal. I fell to the ground between the benches, watching blood drip down the wood. People screamed, threw themselves to the ground, shielding children with their bodies. The world around me seemed in slow motion, as if time had decided to stop. And then, silence. I left my body. I didn't walk, nor did I float. I went pulled, something invisible, like a reverse wind, carried me upward, through the roof of the destroyed church, up, until everything went white. A white so intense that it hurt my eyes, even though I no longer had them open. That's when he appeared. Yes, Jesus. But not the way they paint stained glass windows. It wasn't just beauty, it was authority. He looked at me as if he had known me since before I was in my mother's womb, as if he knew my fears, my flaws, and yet he called me by name with tenderness. Caleb, come here, my son. We have little time. It was at that moment that he showed me something that would change everything. With his palm facing me, Jesus opened 4 books before me. They floated in the air, each with a flaming cover and golden letters as vivid as liquid fire. These are the spiritual records, he said, and these are the 4 books that every Christian should know before time runs out. But before he let me read them, Jesus pointed down. What you will see now, he said with sadness in his eyes, is what happens when my children ignore the warning. That's when I saw absolute terror. The light vanished. In the blink of an eye, I was standing, if I can even say I had a body, on the edge of a black abyss. And I'm not using that word poetically. It was literally a abyss, a gigantic opening that stretched as far as the eye could see. And from it came a sound I will never forget. Shouting, thousands, of all ages, of all tones of voice, screams of despair, screams that seemed to have been ripped from the depths of the human being. And then, laughter, distorted, animalistic laughter, coming from creatures I couldn't yet see, but who knew I was there. They felt Jesus remained by my side, and even there, in that suffocating atmosphere, his presence protected me like an invisible shield. This, he said, is the fate of all who harbor hatred in their hearts until it becomes part of their soul. Those who, even after hearing my voice, have chosen the path of violence, revenge, and contempt for the lives of others. Down below, I began to see shapes, human bodies, but distorted, writhing as if the pain itself had transformed them. Some screamed for mercy, others pounded on the invisible wall surrounding them, and then I saw the shooter at my church. Yes, the man who had invaded the cult, armed and taken so many lives. He was there, and he wasn't the same as before. His face was filled with an expression I'd never seen in my life. Total consciousness. He knew. You knew what he had done. Every face he had erased from the earth, every traumatized child, every wounded soul, all of it played out before him in an endless loop. His pain wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. He felt in his flesh what he caused to others, Over and over again, and around him, demonic creatures approached. They didn't torture him with fire. They whispered, "You were never loved. You were right to hate. They deserved it." Lies. The same lies that had led him to that day. Now they became chains, and he could no longer escape. "Why is he here?" I asked Jesus, tears in my eyes. I felt angry, yes, but much more. I felt pity. "Because he chose every step," Jesus replied. I called to him, many times, in dreams, through people, even in the last seconds. But he closed his ears and chose to feed the darkness. And now, that darkness consumes him. I looked around more and saw that I was not alone. There were others, many others. People who had committed horrible crimes, but also people who had pulled a trigger. People who cultivated hatred in silence, who hated churches, hated believers, hated life itself, and who indulged in the pleasure of imagining tragedies. Hell, I discovered there, does not start after death. It starts in the heart. At that moment, Jesus raised his hand and the scream stopped. For a second, then, pointing to the heavens, he said, "Now, Caleb, you need to understand why these 4 books were written. They were not written on earth, but without them, many of my people will not survive what is coming." The abyss disappeared like smoke in the wind. Now I was standing again in the presence of Jesus, in a place that seemed made of liquid light. It was impossible to describe with human words. It was as if the air were composed of glory, as if every particle vibrated with eternal life. And there, before me, floated 4 books. Real, material, but at the same time, supernatural. The cloaks seemed to be made of a living gold, pulsating with energy. They glowed with different intensity, as if each carried a unique kind of spiritual power. Jesus approached them and said, "These are the 4 spiritual records that every Christian needs to know. They are not on the shelves of any bookstore. They are not in the hands of men, but their truths are scattered in fragments throughout the scriptures, and now they must be understood before the end comes." My heart raced. It was as if I was about to witness something that hell itself did not want revealed. Jesus reached out his hand and first book opened. Book 1, the record of those who gather inside. I saw thousands of churches, small, large, simple, modern. But what shocked me was that every time Christians gathered to worship, even in fear, an immense light was lit in the spiritual world. A light so strong that it blinded creatures of darkness. "When my people gather, hell trembles," Jesus said. This book records every worship service, every heartfelt praise, every prayer meeting, especially those held amid terror. And then he showed the opposite. When churches empty out of fear, gaps open, loopholes that demons use to spread doubts, divisions, and spiritual coldness. The enemy wants empty houses, silent pulpits, and childless pews. But those who continue to gather, even at risk, are being marked in this book. They are the ones who sustain the visible kingdom with their invisible faith. Jesus closed the book, and tears streamed from my eyes. I never thought that the mere presence of a believer in a church pew was a weapon of war. Book 2, the record of those who fell and were raised up. This book was different. When it opened, moving images appeared. I saw people at their worst, believers falling into addiction, pastors into adultery, young Christians losing their faith. But then, I saw something that took my breath away, angels lifting them up. "These are the ones the world cancels," Jesus said, "but I restore them." This book contains the names of everyone who fell, but chose to rise in sincere repentance. He looked me in the eyes seriously. "In the coming years, many leaders will fall, many Christians will stray, but what will determine their fate is not their fall. It is their decision to return." A clear message, a warning, and a promise. Jesus touched my forehead and said, "Now you understand why you need to come back. People need to know that the spiritual world is real, that every decision echoes into eternity, and that these 4 books are being written. Now, as each person chooses light or darkness." 2 books were still closed, and I was trembling inside. Jesus then reached out his hand and touched the 3rd book. As it opened, I felt a pressure in my chest so strong that it almost took my breath away, as if an invisible hand were squeezing my heart. The pages were filled with maps, but not ordinary maps. They were spiritual maps of the United States with red dots pulsing like open wounds, as if something were bleeding over the nation. And around these dots, shadowy figures circled, laughing and spreading black clouds that spread like poison in the air. "This," Jesus said, his voice thick with pain, "is the book of spiritual goals. Each point here represents a place where hell plans to sow terror and despair. Churches, schools, faith gatherings, houses of worship, these are places marked for attack, physical or spiritual, and mine are dormant. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. They think it's random, that these are isolated tragedies, but they're not. Every church attack, every school massacre, every attack on faith is part of an organized spiritual war. Plans are drawn in the dark places you have seen before. I watched the attacks unfold, men setting off homemade bombs, teenagers seduced by hate on online forums, women overcome by spirits of vengeance. They all had one thing in common: unhealed emotional wounds, insulation, and spiritual voices whispering lies. Jesus pointed to a church on the map that was beginning to glow gold. It was small, with only a dozen members, but there, people prayed in the early hours, on their knees, weeping for the city. "This is how you erase a target," he said. "The intercession of the righteous is more powerful than any demonic plan." But my people have stopped watching. They have stopped praying. They have stopped caring. The weight of what he said fell upon me like an avalanche. Jesus then showed me something I will never forget. I saw a demon in the form of black smoke sitting next to a teenager in his room. He was crying, listening to depressing music, looking at pictures of guns online. The demon whispered, "Nobody cares. Hurt them. Hurt yourself." But then, a lady started to pray in another house, on his knees, with tears, and a light came out of his mouth, passed through streets, walls, and blew that smoke into pieces. Jesus looked at me urgently. "The enemy plans, but my intercessors have the power to cancel tragedies with a whisper of faith. If only my people understood this." He closed the book. The pages still shone with red and gold dots, showing that the war was still going on. "Now," he said in the firmest voice I had ever heard, "it is time to look at the last book, and it is the most important of all." The fourth and final book floated alone, separate from the others. Its glow wasn't golden like the previous ones. It was like a translucent blue flame, swaying as if it had a life of its own. Jesus approached, and when he touched the cloak, a sound echoed through the space around us, a deep, collective cry, coming from millions of voices. "This," he said, "is the book of the called, those who still sleep." The pages opened by themselves, and what I saw cut me to pieces. Had faces, thousands, perhaps millions, young, old, men, women, children, all with their eyes closed, as if sleeping, standing up. In their hands, shining swords, but rusty. Upon their heads, invisible crowns, but covered in dust. And behind them, the world on fire. These are mine, my chosen ones, my warriors, people who were born with a spiritual calling engraved in their souls, but who have not yet awakened. Jesus approached a woman on the page. She looked to be in her 50s, sitting in an office. She stared at a computer screen with boredom, as if her life had lost its luster. But above her I saw a shining suit of spiritual armor, and an angel standing behind her, waiting. She should be preaching to the nations, Jesus said, but she let the shame of past mistakes paralyze her. I turned the page. A young man, headphones on, playing video games, laughing at dirty jokes with online friends, but behind him, a heavenly library. His spiritual eyes, still closed, hid the fact that he had been called to interpret the times and reveal prophecies. This one should be teaching my mysteries, but he still believes he was born by chance. With each page, a new spiritual cry echoed. People with gifts of healing, burying their talents under fear. Women called to intercede, busy trying to please everyone. Men with the gift of leadership, hiding behind the excuse of the right time. They think they are waiting for me, Jesus said firmly, but I am the one waiting for them. I felt as if my very spirit was being ripped apart. How many were living lukewarm lives, thinking the gospel was just about attending church on Sundays? How many had been called to resist the advance of darkness and were distracted by the world? Jesus then looked at me with the most intense eyes I have ever seen. Hell has no fear of sleeping believers, but it trembles before one who awakens. And this book will only be completed when those who are here wake up. He then closed the book. A last blue light flashed, And then it was gone. Everything went silent. Now you know, Caleb. Hell is real. Heaven is real. And war is real. These 4 books are not allegories. They are living records, and time is running out. I tried to speak, but no words came out, because I knew, in that moment, that this revelation was not just for me. It was a warning to everyone who hears, believes, and still breathes. Jesus had shown me the 4 books, and now, the atmosphere around us changed. The soft, golden light was being replaced by incandescent flash, as if the sky itself was reacting to what had just been revealed. And then I saw what I can only describe as heaven's reaction to war on earth. Above us, spiritual windows opened, and I saw angels running, literally running, like warriors on standby. They blew trumpets, raised flaming swords, consulted celestial maps. It was as if a great attack was about to begin, but not from hell, from heaven. Jesus, without taking his eyes off me, spoke in a deep voice. You've seen the records. Now you need to understand the impact. Every choice made on earth has repercussions in the kingdom, and when my people rise up, all heaven moves. At that moment, he pointed down, and I saw my nation, the United States, as if suspended before me, but not like on political maps. It was as if I were seeing the spiritual soul of America, and she was bleeding. From east to west, I saw spiritual crack sites of massacres, shootings, suicides, abuse, destroyed churches. Each tragedy was like an open wound in the country's body. Small demons crawled through these cracks, feeding on pain, anger, and fear, and where there was no prayer, they grew. But then, Jesus raised his hand, and I saw something that brought me to my knees. Ordinary people, fathers, mothers, teenagers, grandparents, humble pastors, children on their knees, strangers, in dark rooms, in basements, in hospitals, in prison, praying, whispering, weeping, crying out. These prayers rose like blue fire, straight to the heavens, and when they arrived, the angels reacted. This is what the enemy wants to extinguish, Jesus said. The flame, the fire, the persistence of the righteous. He wants my people to give up, to abandon the faith, to flee the church, to live in fear. But if they only knew the power they have. At that moment, Jesus showed them a small church, only 11 people in that service. The pastor preached with a torn Bible. An old fan made noise. And yet, as they sang, an explosion of light came out of that place in the spirit world, as if a flash bomb had detonated in the dark. Demons fled. Chains were broken. A young man who had been planning a shooting the following week fell to his knees in his own home. Unable to understand why, he began to cry, to feel something he had never felt before. It was a reflection of the worship of that small church. Jesus looked at me with tears in his eyes. My people need to understand. Every service is a war won. Every praise is a bomb against hell. Every prayer changes destinies. But time is running out. The pain in his words was indescribable. More attacks will come, Caleb. The enemy is already positioning their guns. But my people can still fight back. There's still time. That's why I'm sending you back. So you can tell what you saw. So the sleeping ones will wake up. So the fearful ones will rise. So the wounded will fight again. And then he came to me. He touched my shoulder. And he said, "It's almost time." A sound began to invade the room, like sirens, like voices, like screams. But it wasn't there. It was fish. In the physical world, the sound of sirens mingled with human screams, hurried voices, and running footsteps. Everything seemed blurry, like an out-of-focus film. But I was no longer in the sky. I had come back. I felt an unbearable pain in my chest, as if my soul had re-entered a body too broken to receive something so alive. It was like trying to put thunder inside a cardboard box. I was lying on the church floor. Blood was still dripping down my shirt. But the loudest sound at that moment wasn't my heart beating. It was the presence of God still pulsating within me. "He's breathing!" Someone shouted. My God, he's back. The hands that lifted me were shaking. Paramedics, church members, my mother in tears. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what the Sakyong carried inside me. It was like carrying the sky itself clutched in one's chest, and the urgency of a message that could save lives or condemn them if it were silenced. I couldn't speak yet. My body hurt too much, but my mind, My soul was screaming. The books, the 4 books, they need to know. As they placed me on the stretcher, I saw the faces around me, faces of Christians who were hurt, scared, in shock, but spiritually, I saw them, like soldiers who had been caught by surprise in the middle of a minefield, and who now had to choose, flee or fight. And then, something supernatural happened. Even still between life and death, even intubated, bleeding, my spirit continued, in direct connection with the sky. And that's when I realized that had not returned alone. Behind the paramedics, behind the walls of the ambulance, I saw angels. They were in position, watching, waiting for commands, but not from the sky, of the people of God. And I clearly heard the voice of Jesus echoing within me, even with my body unconscious. Tell them, Caleb, that the heavens are ready to act, but they wait for a sound, the sound of repentance, the sound of worship, the sound of unity, the sound of the living church that does not give in to fear. Tell them they can still turn this war around, but they need to act now. At the hospital, the doctor said I was terminal. My lungs had collapsed. The bleeding was severe. According to them, it shouldn't have survived even 5 minutes with the wound I received. But there I was, breathing, reacting, carrying the sky inside. And the moment my consciousness returned completely, the first thing I did was write. Yes, write. Write everything I saw. The 4 books, hell, the angels, the churches at war, and the message. Because I understood, with a clarity that no human being taught me, whoever knows the other side can never remain silent. Jesus returned me to earth with a mission, and every word that came out of me was a grenade thrown at hell. But the battle was just beginning. After I returned, there was no celebration, there was no relief, there was urgency. It was as if every cell in my body was screaming, "You saw what no one else saw. Now speak." But talking about what I saw, it wasn't easy, because what I experienced, it was not a pretty vision of heaven with harps and flowers. It was a call to arms, a spiritual alarm that still is sounding now, as you listen to or read this testimony. And this is where you come in. Yes, you. While the doctors were still trying to figure out how I survived, I just kept thinking, will people believe it? Will they understand the magnitude of the danger? Why most people live as if what's happening in churches is just a human tragedy, just a social problem, just another statistic. But Jesus showed me it is not. Every attack on a place of worship is part of an ancient plan, devised by spiritual forces that they don't rest, demons that feed on the fear of believers, that dance when church is empty, that celebrate every service canceled for safety, every prayer meeting replaced by entertainment, every Christian who says, "I will pray alone at home," while hell gains territory. Jesus showed me that the true goal were never the buildings, but the hearts, faith, courage, the unity of God's children. Fear is the enemy's most effective weapon, he said, because it paralyzes without killing. And that's why this testimony is not meant to move. It is meant to summon. You who are there, perhaps distant, perhaps cold, perhaps even angry with God because of tragedies, know this. The time for being a spectator is over. Either you rise up as a warrior, or you will be taken by the darkness that is sweeping this world. Jesus is still calling, but he's not calling lukewarm believers. He's calling soldiers. And no, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know the Bible by heart. You don't have to have a visible ministry. You just have Tor Sponder. Because if you heard this, if you got this far, it's because he is choosing you now. I saw the faces in the 4 books. Many looked like you. And Jesus said, "Wake up, my daughter. Get up, my son. The time is now." Hell knows who you are, and is afraid of what you might do if you wake up. When I returned, the first person to hear me was a nurse. I couldn't even speak properly yet, but I grabbed her wrist and whispered, "You're in the book. You've been called. Don't give up." She fell to her knees right there. She began to cry, and confessed that that morning, before going to the hospital, she had prayed for a sign that God still cared about her. I was the sign, and you now is next. The question is not, did God choose me? The question is, will you answer before time runs out? Because I saw what happens to those who ignore it. And I saw the explosive power of those who say yes. The biggest lie that hell has spread is that you are just another one, another Christian, another soul, another life. but I saw with my own eyes. Every yes that someone gives to God in the silence of their room triggers a chain reaction in the spiritual world. I saw an elderly woman, kneeling beside her bed, praying alone. She seemed invisible to the world. No platform, no ministry, no cameras. But in heaven, she was a general. With every word she spoke, demons were driven from her neighborhood. Young people were saved from suicide. Lives were spared from tragedies they'll never know almost happened. It is in the book of those who sustain, Jesus told me. She never stood in a pulpit, but she saved more lives than many pastors. And I understood. It's not about visibility, it's about obedience. I also saw a teenager, yes, a boy in a ripped sweatshirt and headphones, standing in the middle of a crowd of jeers. Suddenly, he went silent. He narrowed his eyes, and he prayed softly and thought, Jesus, if you still have something for me, show me. The moment he said this, just in his mind, a light shone upon him, and an angel was released towards him. This is the sound the heavens wait for, Jesus said. It's not loud voices, it's willing hearts. I've seen men in the midst of adultery touched by a childhood memory, the day their grandmother prayed for them. I've seen religious leaders on the verge of giving up, hearing a simple word from a child and being restored from within. I've seen abandoned mothers, wounded fathers, confused young people, all with a flash of faith being enough to turn the tide. And Jesus said something to me that made me shudder. Caleb, all hell can be contained by a single true yes. When a soul surrenders completely, the heavens move, the world changes, and Satan loses his ground. In the vision I had, thousands of Christians were standing in a line of fire. On one side, fear. On the other, faith. Every time someone took a step toward faith, a wall of light appeared behind him, preventing the darkness from reaching him again. But there were also those who hesitated, those who said, I'm not ready, I'm too weak, God will not use me. And I saw the demons whispering in their ears, you're just one more, it's too late, you missed your chance. Lie. Jesus showed me something that I want you to keep with all your heart. Hell only wins when silence wins. But when someone says, yes, Lord, even without strength, even with fear, heaven acts. And at that moment, I understood the urgency of my return. It wasn't just to tell what I saw. It was supposed to waken the sleeping ones, for remember the forgotten, for shake up those who think they still have time. Because if you have heard this message up to here, it is because heaven is screaming at you inside. You are no longer one, you are a calling. Coming back from death was a miracle, but come back with an eternal message burning in the chest was the real weight of my second chance. Jesus didn't show me hell just to scare me. He didn't reveal the 4 books just to satisfy my spiritual curiosity. He sent me back to warn you. Yes, you. If you got this far thinking this was just another near-death experience story, then you still don't understand the gravity of what is happening. I saw people being pushed into hell while they thought they were safe. I saw distracted Christians living with the name of Jesus on their lips and the world in their hearts. I saw churches without prayer, without repentance, without the presence of God, being ignored by heaven. We children marked for death in future shootings. And I also saw these tragedies being canceled by a single mother on her knees in the room. Jesus told me something that still shakes me to this day. The doors of mercy are still open, but will soon close. And when that happens, there will be no time for excuses. I saw the end timer. It had no numbers, but each spiritual beat echoed in the sky like a sound of urgency. Every soul that still lives is in the time of decision. Not tomorrow, today, now. I saw heaven crying for people who ignored its calls. I saw hell celebrating every Christian who said, it's not my business. And I saw angels preparing for the greatest spiritual battle in the history of humanity. Jesus said to me with eyes as firm as fire, tell them the books are still being written. Say there's still time to change sides. Say that the weapons of the Spirit are being handed out now, but only those who say yes will receive them. So, if you've made it this far, and you're still thinking, is this all real? I tell you with an open soul, it's more real than anything you've ever seen with your eyes. Hell is real, and it's horrible. Heaven is real, and it is more glorious than any words can describe. But what's going on now? This silent, deadly spiritual war. It's your time to choose. You can go on living as if you were just one more, or you can get up as part of the invisible army that Jesus is awakening. And if there is still any doubt, listen to this. If you have heard this testimony, then your name is already marked for awakening. The choice is yours, but time is almost up. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,